Imagine a civilization born among the clouds, perched at the very edge of the sky. This was the world of the Inca, a powerful empire that thrived in one of the most extreme environments on Earth, the Andes Mountains. Today, we journey back in time to understand how these towering peaks, with their thin air and treacherous slopes, forged a unique civilization, shaping not just how the Inca lived, but how they thought, worked, and survived. The Andes are a land of dramatic contrasts. You have arid coastal deserts, soaring snow-capped peaks, and dense, humid jungles, all within a short distance of each other. For the Inca, this wasn't just a backdrop. It was a daily challenge. Survival here demanded more than just strength. It required ingenuity, resilience, and above all, a profound sense of community. The mountains were both a fortress and a test, a constant force that pushed the Inca to innovate or perish. This unforgiving landscape became the crucible in which their entire society was forged. Think about the sheer logistics of building an empire here. There were no broad, flat plains for easy farming, no gentle rivers for simple transport. Every step was a climb, every field was a conquest against gravity. This constant struggle against nature fostered a deep-seated psychology of survival. The Inca learned early on that individualism was a luxury they couldn't afford. A single family, a single person, would be helpless against a landslide, a crop failure, or the harsh mountain climate. Survival was a team sport. This led to one of the most incredible feats of ancient engineering: vertical farming. The Inca didn't see steep mountainsides as obstacles. They saw them as opportunities. They meticulously carved the slopes into giant staircases of stone, creating agricultural terraces known as Andines. These weren't just simple ledges dug into the dirt. They were sophisticated multi-layered structures. The base layer was coarse gravel for drainage, followed by sand, and topped with rich topsoil, often carried up from the valleys below. Each terrace created its own microclimate. The stone walls absorbed the sun's heat during the day and radiated it back at night, protecting the crops from the brutal overnight frost that is so common at high altitudes. This allowed them to grow a staggering variety of crops, like potatoes, maize, and quinoa, at elevations where you'd think nothing could survive. They essentially created an archipelago of farmable land, stretching vertically up the mountains. This system was so effective that it allowed them to support a population of millions, a feat that would be challenging even with modern technology. It's a testament to their brilliant understanding of hydrology, soil science, and thermodynamics. But building these terraces required a colossal amount of organized labor. This is where the Inca concept of collective effort truly shines. Their society was built on a system of reciprocity and shared work. One key principle was called Ani, which roughly translates to today for you, tomorrow for me. If your neighbor needed help building their house or harvesting their crops, you helped them, knowing that when you needed help, they would do the same for you. It was a social safety net woven into the fabric of daily life. On a larger scale, there was the mita system. This was a form of public service, a labor tax where every able-bodied man was required to work for the state for a certain number of days each year. This wasn't slave labor. It was seen as a duty to the empire, a way of contributing to the greater good. This massive coordinated workforce is what built the incredible roads, the sprawling cities like Cusco, and the majestic mountaintop estate of Machu Picchu. It's how they constructed thousands of miles of terraces and complex irrigation channels that watered them. The mita system allowed the Inca state to mobilize millions of people for massive public works projects without a currency. In return for their labor, the state provided for the people. It managed enormous storehouses called kulkas filled with food, textiles, and other goods. In times of famine or natural disaster, the state would distribute these supplies to the affected regions, ensuring no one starved. It was a grand social contract. You work for the empire, and the empire provides for you. This collective mindset permeated every aspect of Inca life. The individual was secondary to the elu, the extended family or clan that formed the basic unit of society. Land wasn't owned by individuals, but by the elu, which then allocated it to families based on their needs. Success was measured not by personal wealth, but by the well-being of the community. This emphasis on the group over the self stands in stark contrast to the individualistic values that dominate many modern societies. The Inca worldview was deeply connected to their environment. The mountains weren't just rock and ice. They were powerful deities known as apus, spirits that watched over the people and had to be respected and appeased. The sun, Inti, was their principal god, the giver of life and warmth, essential for growing crops in the cold highlands. Even Pachamama, Mother Earth, was a living entity that they nurtured through their farming practices. Their entire cosmology was a reflection of the world around them, a world where survival depended on balance and respect for the powerful forces of nature. So when we look at the ruins of Machu Picchu clinging impossibly to a mountain ridge, we're not just seeing old stones. We're seeing the physical manifestation of a unique survival psychology. We're seeing the result of a society that chose cooperation over competition, community over the individual. The Inca didn't just conquer the Andes. They harmonized with them. They learned the mountains' harsh lessons and turned them into principles for building one of the most organized and impressive civilizations in history. Their story is a powerful reminder that the environment we live in does more than just surround us. It shapes us, challenges us, and ultimately defines who we are. The Inca Empire at the edge of the sky teaches us that in the face of overwhelming odds, our greatest strength might not be our individual ambition, but our ability to come together. Imagine an empire stretching for thousands of miles with millions of people, magnificent cities, and intricate road systems, all functioning without a single coin. No money, no markets, not even a writing system as we know it. This isn't a fantasy novel. This was the reality of the Inca Empire, one of history's most fascinating and unique civilizations. How on earth did they manage it? Stick around, because the answer will change how you think about wealth, work, and society itself. The Inca Empire, or Tawantinsuyo as they called it, thrived in the Andes Mountains of South America from the early 15th century until the Spanish conquest in the 1530s. At its peak, it was the largest empire in the world. Yet, if you were an Inca citizen, you never bought a loaf of bread, never haggled at a market stall, and never saved up for a rainy day. So, how did anything get done? The secret sauce was a system called meta. Meta was a form of mandatory public service, essentially a labor tax. Every able-bodied man was required to work for the state for a certain number of days each year. This wasn't slave labor in the traditional sense. It was a civic duty, a contribution to the collective good. What kind of work are we talking about? Everything. Building the incredible roads that connected the empire, constructing temples and palaces, farming on state-owned land, mining for precious metals, or even serving in the army. This massive organized workforce was the engine that powered the entire empire. Instead of paying taxes with money, people paid with their time and skills. Think about it this way. The state provided for its people, and in return, the people provided their labor to the state. It was a grand, reciprocal agreement. This leads to the next mind-blowing piece of the puzzle, the Inca storage system. The empire built a vast network of storehouses, called cocas, all across its territory. These weren't just little sheds. They were massive, strategically placed warehouses. The food and goods produced through the meta labor, potatoes, maize, quinoa, textiles, pottery, were all sent to these cocas. This centralized system was an ingenious solution to the harsh Andean environment, where droughts, floods, and frosts could wipe out a harvest in an instant. If one region had a bad year, the state could simply dispatch food from the cocas to prevent famine. It was a massive-scale insurance policy. Soldiers on the move, state officials, and workers fulfilling their MITA obligations were all fed and clothed from these reserves. It ensured stability and reduced the risk of starvation, something that many European societies of the same era struggled with constantly. So they had a system for labor and a system for distribution, but how did they keep track of it all? Remember, no writing. They couldn't just jot down 500 bushels of corn from the northern province or 200 textiles owed to the army. This is where one of the most brilliant inventions of the ancient world comes into play, the quipu. A quipu is a deceptively simple-looking device made of colored strings and knots. But in the hands of a trained administrator, a quipu kameok, it was a sophisticated data management tool. Each string, its color, the type of knot, and its position on the main cord could represent a huge amount of information. They used a decimal system just like we do today. So knot in a certain position could mean 10, 100, or 1,000. They could record census data, tracking the number of people in a village, their ages, and their professions. They could track the contents of the cocas down to the last potato. They could manage the complex logistics of the MITA system, knowing who had fulfilled their labor tax and who hadn't. For a long time, historians believe quipus were just for numbers. But recent research suggests they might have been even more complex. Some scholars argue that the combination of colors and knots could have represented non-numerical information, like stories or historical records, a kind of three-dimensional code. While we haven't fully cracked it yet, it's clear the quipu was the Incas' answer to spreadsheets, accounting ledgers, and databases, all rolled into one portable, string-based device. It was the administrative backbone of a moneyless empire. This entire economic model was built on a fundamentally different philosophy than our own. Our modern economies are largely driven by the pursuit of profit and individual wealth accumulation. The Inca economy, on the other hand, was focused on continuity, reciprocity, and collective well-being. The goal wasn't to get rich. It was to ensure the empire and its people survived and thrived year after year. The Sapa Inca, the emperor, was seen as a divine ruler responsible for maintaining cosmic balance and ensuring the prosperity of his people. The wealth of the empire wasn't measured in gold, even though they had plenty of it. Gold and silver were valued for their spiritual and aesthetic properties, used to create beautiful objects to honor the gods and the emperor, not to buy and sell goods. True wealth was the productivity of the land and the labor of the people. Of course, this system wasn't a perfect utopia. It was a hierarchical, authoritarian society. Your life was largely determined by the state. There was little room for individual economic freedom as we understand it. You couldn't just decide to become an artisan and sell your wares to the highest bidder. Your role was assigned and your life was managed. But the trade-off was a remarkable level of security. You were guaranteed food, clothing, and shelter. The risk of absolute poverty or starvation was practically eliminated. It was a society built on obligation and security, not freedom and risk. When the Spanish conquistadors arrived, they were baffled. They saw cities filled with gold and silver, but no one was using it as money. They saw a highly organized society, but no markets or merchants in the way they understood them. This fundamental clash of worldviews was a major factor in the empire's downfall. The Spanish were driven by a thirst for gold and personal enrichment, concepts that were alien to the Inca economic system. They dismantled the Meta and the Coca network, breaking the reciprocal bonds that held the empire together and plunging the region into a new economic reality based on extraction and exploitation. So the Inca Empire stands as a powerful testament to human ingenuity. It proves that money is not an inevitable or necessary component of a large, complex civilization. They built a society on principles of labor exchange and centralized redistribution, managing it all with an intricate system of knotted cords. They prioritized collective stability over individual profit. While their world was vastly different from ours, studying the Inca forces us to ask some big questions. What is wealth, really? What is the purpose of an economy? And could there be other ways to organize a society beyond the ones we take for granted? The empire of the Inca may be long gone, but its legacy, an empire without money, continues to challenge and inspire us today. How do you control an empire stretching 2,500 miles without a single written word? No laws, no decrees, no letters. It sounds impossible, right? Yet the Inca Empire, one of the most sophisticated civilizations in the Americas, did exactly that. They built a massive, centrally controlled state that managed millions of people, all without what we consider the most basic tool of administration, writing. So, how did they pull it off? This is the story of how the Inca engineered obedience, not with ink and paper, but with ropes, roads, and rituals. Let's start with the sheer scale of the challenge. The Inca Empire, or Tawantinsuyu, the land of the four quarters, was vast and incredibly diverse. It stretched along the Andes Mountains, from modern-day Colombia down to Chile, encompassing deserts, jungles, and towering peaks. Ruling this terrain was a logistical nightmare. For comparison, the Romaine Empire, famous for its administration, relied heavily on written laws, records, and correspondence. The Inca had none of that. They also didn't have the wheel for transport or draft animals like horses or oxen. Everything moved on human feet or the backs of llamas. So how did they send a message from the capital Cusco to a governor 1,000 miles away? They built one of the most incredible infrastructures of the ancient world, the Great Inca Road, or Capac On. This was a 25,000-mile network of roads, rivaling the Roman system. These weren't just dirt paths. They were meticulously engineered paved highways, complete with bridges, tunnels, and stairways cut into mountainsides. This road system was the empire's nervous system, and its lifeblood was a relay system of runners called chasqui. These chasqui were elite messengers. trained from a young age to be incredibly fast and resilient. They were stationed in small relay huts called tambos, placed every few miles along the road. When a message arrived, a chasqui would run at top speed to the next station, pass the message, and a fresh runner would take over. This system was astonishingly efficient. A message could travel up to 150 miles in a single day. But what were they carrying if not letters? They carried quipus. The quipu is one of the most fascinating objects from the ancient world. It's a collection of knotted strings, usually made from llama or alpaca wool. For a long time, we thought they were just simple accounting tools, like an abacus. And they were, but they were so much more. The color of the strings, the way the knots were tied, their position on the string, all of it contained information. The quipus recorded census data, tax obligations, and warehouse inventories. They were the empire's spreadsheets and databases, all encoded in knots. A special class of accountants and record keepers, the quipucameoks, were trained to create and interpret these complex devices. They could read a quipu and tell you exactly how many bags of maize were in a storehouse 500 miles away. So, while not a form of writing as we know it, the quipu was a sophisticated system for storing and transmitting numerical data, the backbone of imperial control. But managing resources is only one part of ruling. How do you get millions of people to obey, to pay their taxes, and to see themselves as part of a single empire? The Inca did this through a masterful blend of architecture, ritual, and ideology. Their architecture was a physical manifestation of power. When the Inca conquered a new territory, they didn't just defeat the local army. They rebuilt the local center in the unmistakable Inca style. They used a unique and incredibly precise method of stonework, fitting massive, irregularly shaped boulders together without any mortar. These stones fit so perfectly that you can't even slide a knife blade between them. When you walked into a newly conquered town and saw these immense, imposing structures, the message was clear: we are here, we are powerful, and we are permanent. This architectural style was uniform across the empire, a constant visual reminder of Cusco's authority. Sites like Machu Picchu or Sacsayhuaman are not just beautiful ruins. They were designed to inspire awe and obedience. They were symbols of Inca engineering prowess and their domination over the natural world itself. This physical dominance was reinforced by a carefully constructed state ideology. The emperor, the Sapa Inca, was not just a king. He was considered the living son of the sun god, Inti. He was a divine being. This framed his authority not as a political arrangement, but as part of the cosmic order. To disobey the Sapa Inca was to defy the gods and disrupt the balance of the universe. This divine right to rule was broadcast constantly through elaborate public ceremonies and rituals. Huge festivals, tied to the agricultural calendar, would take place in the main plazas of Inca centers. The Sapa Inca himself would preside over these events, leading sacrifices and making offerings to the gods. Thousands of people from surrounding regions would be brought in to participate. They would be feasted, given chicha beer, and witness the splendor and generosity of the Inca state. These rituals were not just religious observances. They were political theater on a grand scale. They brought diverse groups of people together, making them feel like part of a single grand project, all while reinforcing the social hierarchy with the divine emperor at the very top. It was a way of training behavior, of making loyalty and obedience a deeply ingrained habit. The Inca also understood the power of relocation and education. When a region was conquered, the Inca would often move entire populations. Loyal groups would be moved into rebellious areas to act as an example and a stabilizing force. The children of conquered local leaders would be taken to Cusco. There, they would be educated in Inca language, religion, and administration. They were treated well, but they were also hostages. After their education, they would be sent back to rule their home provinces, but now they were thoroughly Incaized. They understood the system, they had connections in the capital, and their loyalty was now tied to the empire that had raised them. This entire system was a form of social engineering. From the runners on the roads to the knots in the quipus, from the stones in the walls to the rituals in the plazas, every element of Inca society was designed to ensure cohesion and control. They created a culture where obedience was not just enforced, it was normalized. It was the natural way of things, aligned with the cosmos itself. What's truly remarkable is that this complex society functions so effectively without the written word. It challenges our modern assumptions about what's necessary to build a civilization. The Inca proved that there are other ways to organize human society, to transmit information, and to build an empire. Their legacy, written not in ink but in stone, string, and ceremony, shows us the incredible ingenuity of the human mind and the diverse paths to power and order. Imagine standing on a windswept Andean peak, the world stretching out below you like a map. For the Inca, this wasn't just a landscape, it was alive. The mountains, the rivers, the very earth beneath their feet were powerful, conscious beings they called wakas. This wasn't just poetry. It was a fundamental truth that shaped their entire world. The Inca didn't see themselves as separate from nature, but as part of a grand cosmic family. Every peak had a spirit, every spring was a gift, and the sun, Inti, was their divine ancestor. Living in harmony with these forces wasn't an option. It was the very definition of survival. This intimate relationship with the natural world formed the bedrock of their religion. Inca spirituality wasn't a Sunday affair. It was woven into the fabric of daily life, from planting crops to building roads. Their faith was a sophisticated survival strategy. Think about it, the Andes are a tough place to live. Unpredictable weather, earthquakes, droughts, these were constant threats. The Inca believed these events weren't random. They were messages from the wakas. A drought might mean the mountain spirits were thirsty. A frost could be a sign of displeasure from the sky gods. So their religion became a system for understanding and responding to this volatile world. They developed an incredibly detailed calendar that tracked celestial movements, agricultural cycles, and religious festivals, all intertwined. This allowed them to organize their society with remarkable efficiency, ensuring that planting, harvesting, and storing food happened at precisely the right times. It was a cosmic clockwork, and their faith was the key that wound it. This wasn't just about appeasing gods. It was about managing risk in one of the most challenging environments on Earth. So, how did you communicate with these powerful, often unpredictable, natural forces? This is where the concept of sacrifice comes in, and it's one of the most misunderstood aspects of Inca culture. For us, the word sacrifice often has dark, grim connotations. But for the Inca, it was more like a negotiation. A form of reciprocity they called aini. It was a sacred exchange. If you wanted the earth to give you a good harvest, you had to give something back. If you needed a river to stay in its banks, you made an offering. These offerings ranged from simple things like coca leaves and corn beer, which were offered daily, to more valuable items like intricately woven textiles and precious seashells. These were not casual gestures. They were part of a continuous, vital dialogue with the cosmos. It was about maintaining balance. You take from the earth, so you give back to the earth. This principle of reciprocity governed everything, from relationships between neighbors to the relationship between the empire and the gods. Of course, the most dramatic form of sacrifice involved llamas and, in very rare and significant circumstances, humans. The sacrifice of a perfectly white llama was a major event, meant to appease the most powerful deities. Human sacrifice, called kapakoka, was the ultimate offering, reserved for times of extreme crisis, a devastating earthquake, a crippling famine, or the death of an emperor. Children, considered pure and perfect, were chosen for this solemn duty. They were treated like royalty on their long journey to a high mountain peak, the place where they would meet the gods. From the Inca perspective, this was not a brutal act of murder. It was the highest honor, a way to send their most precious gift to the divine realm to restore cosmic order and save their people. It was a desperate plea and a profound act of faith, a way of negotiating with the terrifying uncertainty that defined their world. This brings us to a core fear that haunted the Inca imagination, the fear of chaos or disorder. The Inca universe was balanced on a knife's edge. They believed the world had already been created and destroyed 4 times before their own era, the 5th sun. The constant threat of a cosmic apocalypse, a Pachacuti, an overturning of space and time was very real to them. Any disruption, a failed crop, a rebellion, an eclipse could be a sign that the delicate balance was tipping towards chaos. This deep-seated fear was a powerful tool for social control. The Saipa Inca, the emperor, was not just a political leader. He was the son of the sun god Inti, the divine guarantor of order. His authority was absolute because he was the linchpin holding the cosmos together. To disobey the Saipa Inca was to not just commit a political crime, but a spiritual one. It was to invite chaos, to risk the end of the world. This ideology reinforced a rigid social hierarchy and absolute obedience. Everyone had their place, and stepping out of line threatened the entire structure. The state's propaganda machine, through rituals, myths, and architecture, constantly reminded people that the empire was their shield against the ever-present threat of disorder. Ultimately, Inca faith was more than a set of beliefs. It was the social and spiritual infrastructure that held their vast empire together. Think of it like the impressive road system they built. Just as the roads connected distant territories physically, their shared religion connected the diverse peoples of the empire spiritually. From Ecuador to Chile, people worshipped the same primary gods, participated in the same major festivals, and looked to the Cepa Inca as their divine leader. This shared worldview created a powerful sense of collective identity. The grand rituals in the capital city of Cusco, with their lavish processions and mass celebrations, were a spectacle of unity and power. They brought together representatives from all corners of the empire, reminding them that they were all part of something much larger than their local communities. This religious system provided a common language of meaning, a shared set of rules, and a collective purpose. It explained why they should pay taxes, serve in the army, and work on state projects. It gave their lives meaning and their society its incredible resilience. The Inca Empire wasn't just held together by might but by a powerful, all-encompassing faith that turned a landscape of mountains and valleys into a sacred, ordered cosmos. So, when we look at the ruins of Machu Picchu or the intricate goldwork of Inca artisans, we're not just seeing the remnants of a political empire. We are seeing the physical expression of a profound worldview. We see a people who saw the divine in every rock and river. We see a society that used religion as a sophisticated tool for survival and organization. We see a culture that negotiated with an uncertain world through the principle of sacred reciprocity. And we see an empire built not only on stone and labor, but on a shared faith and a collective fear of the chaos that lay just beyond the horizon. The Inca world was a testament to the power of belief to shape reality, to build an empire, and to hold back the darkness, if only for a while. We are journeying back in time to the Andes Mountains, to explore one of history's most fascinating and enigmatic empires, the Inca. When you think of the Inca, what comes to mind? Majestic Machu Picchu perched on a mountain ridge? Intricate textiles and finely crafted gold? A vast network of roads stretching for thousands of miles? The Inca Empire was, without a doubt, a marvel of engineering, social organization, and administration. It was a civilization that seemed to have achieved a kind of perfection. But what if I told you that this very perfection was also its greatest weakness? That the same systems that made the Incas so powerful also made them incredibly fragile? Let's set the scene. At its peak in the early 16th century, the Inca Empire, known as Tawantinsuyu, or the Realm of the Four Parts, was the largest empire in the pre-Columbian Americas. It stretched from modern-day Colombia down to Chile, encompassing diverse landscapes from coastal deserts to soaring mountain peaks and dense Amazonian jungle. To manage this vast territory and its estimated 10 million people, the Inca created a highly centralized and efficient system. At the very top was the Cepa Inca, a divine ruler believed to be a descendant of the sun god, Inti. His word was law. From the capital city of Cusco, a web of control radiated outwards. The empire was meticulously organized. Society was structured in a decimal system, with officials overseeing groups of 10, 100, 1,000, and so on. A massive road system, the Capac On, connected the empire, allowing armies, messengers, and goods to move with incredible speed. They developed a unique system of knotted strings called quipus to record data, everything from census numbers to warehouse inventories. Food was stored in massive storehouses called colcas, strategically placed to prevent famine in any part of the empire. Labor was organized through a system called the meta, a form of public service tribute. On the surface, it was a perfectly oiled machine, a testament to human ingenuity and order. Every part had its place, every person had their role, and everything was coordinated from the center. This was the Inca's strength, but it was also a ticking time bomb. The problem with a system that is so heavily centralized is that it puts all its eggs in one basket. The entire empire depended on the Cepa Inca and the administrative elite in Cusco. Every major decision, every movement of resources, every response to a crisis had to flow through this central hub. This worked brilliantly as long as the center held and communication lines were open. But what would happen if the head was cut off? What if the brain of the operation was suddenly taken out of the picture? This extreme top-down control created a system with very little local autonomy or adaptability. Regional leaders were more like managers executing orders than independent decision-makers. If a crisis hit a remote province, they had to wait for instructions from Cusco. There was no room for improvisation. The system was designed for stability and control, not for sudden, chaotic change. It was optimized for a predictable world, but the world was about to become anything but predictable. In the 1520s, disaster struck, but it wasn't a Spanish galleon that appeared on the horizon first. It was something invisible, insidious, and far more deadly: disease. Smallpox, measles, and influenza, brought to the Americas by European explorers, raced ahead of the conquistadors themselves. These diseases, to which the indigenous populations had no immunity, swept through the empire like wildfire. The impact was catastrophic. It's estimated that these epidemics may have wiped out as much as 50 to 90% of the population. This wasn't just a human tragedy. It was a systemic collapse. Imagine a complex machine where half the gears suddenly vanish. The middle labor system fell apart because there weren't enough people to work the fields, maintain the roads, or build the temples. The intricate administrative hierarchy crumbled as officials at every level died. The flow of information, carried by chasqui runners along the royal roads, was disrupted. The very fabric of Inca society was being torn apart before a single Spanish soldier set foot in the heartland. And right at this moment of unprecedented crisis, the center failed. The reigning Sapa Inca, Huayna Capac, and his chosen heir both died suddenly from disease, likely smallpox. This created a massive power vacuum. Two of his other sons, Huáscar and Atahualpa, immediately began a brutal and destructive civil war for control of the fractured empire. For 5 years, the Inca fought amongst themselves, further weakening their armies, draining their resources, and deepening the divisions within their society. It was into this perfect storm of plague, civil war, and systemic breakdown that Francisco Pizarro and his small band of just over 160 conquistadors arrived in 1532. They didn't find a strong, unified empire at the height of its power. They found a civilization already on its knees, hollowed out from the inside. Pizarro's capture of Atahualpa at Cajamarca is one of history's most dramatic moments. How could so few men defeat an emperor surrounded by thousands of loyal warriors? The answer lies in the Incas' rigid, centralized structure. With Atahualpa captured, the chain of command was shattered. The Inca generals and soldiers, accustomed to taking direct orders from their divine king, were paralyzed. They didn't know how to react. The Spanish, on the other hand, were accustomed to a more decentralized and flexible style of warfare, where individual initiative was encouraged. They exploited the Incas' systemic weakness perfectly. By capturing the single point of failure, the Sapa Inca, they effectively decapitated the entire empire. The body was still massive, but without its head it was just a floundering giant. The coordination that had been the hallmark of Inca strength was now gone, replaced by confusion and disarray. This story serves as a powerful lesson about the nature of systems, whether they are empires, companies, or even ecological networks. Systems that are highly optimized for a specific set of conditions often become incredibly fragile when those conditions change. Think of it like a Formula One race car. On a smooth, pristine track, it's a marvel of performance and efficiency. But take that same car off-road, onto a bumpy, unpredictable dirt path, and it will fall apart instantly. It has no flexibility, no resilience. The Inca Empire was that Formula One car. It was perfectly adapted to its world. But when a new, chaotic reality of disease and invasion arrived, its very optimization became its fatal flaw. The strength of its perfection was the source of its fragility. But the story of the Inca doesn't end with the fall of their empire. This is crucial. While the political and administrative structure collapsed, the culture did not simply vanish. The Inca were not just a top-down state. They were a continuation of thousands of years of Andean civilization. The cultural memory, the agricultural techniques, the languages like Quechua, the textile traditions, and the spiritual beliefs survived. They went underground, adapted, and blended with new influences. The resilience wasn't in the imperial structure, but in the deep-rooted cultural practices of the people themselves. The Calca storehouses might have fallen into disuse, but the knowledge of terrace farming and growing diverse potato varieties lived on. The Sapa Inca was gone, but the sense of community, or Elu, and the reverence for the Pachamama, or Mother Earth, persisted. The collapse of the Inca state was a political event, but the survival of Andean culture is a testament to the enduring strength found not in rigid perfection, but in adaptation and shared memory. So, what can we learn from the Inca? Their story is a profound reminder that true strength isn't about creating a perfect, unchangeable system. It's about building in resilience, flexibility, and the ability to adapt. An over-optimized system is a brittle one. The Inca collapse wasn't just a defeat. It was a fundamental mismatch between their highly ordered reality and a new, chaotic one that they were unprepared to face. It shows us that even the most impressive structures can be surprisingly fragile, and that sometimes the most enduring strength lies not in the grand imperial designs, but in the quiet, persistent culture of the people. Thanks so much for watching. What are your thoughts on the fall of the Inca? Do you see parallels in our modern world? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this journey into the past, please hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into history. See you next time.